Welcome to NYC Now, your source for local news in and around New York City from WNYC. It's Thursday, May 8th. Here's the midday news from Michael Hill.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says federal officials are reviewing the visa status of people arrested yesterday at a pro-Palestinian demonstration at Columbia University. New York City police say 80 people were taken into custody after protesters occupied a reading room in the school's main library. Columbia's acting president, Claire Shipman, says she called for police after two campus public safety officers got hurt. Shipman says she's heartbroken and incensed that the action took place as students were preparing for finals.
Moreover, I'm deeply disturbed at the idea that at a moment when our international community feels particularly vulnerable, a small group of students would choose to make our institution a target.
The NYPD has not yet released information on charges. A woman is suing New York City after a car hit her after a protest, and police responded by arresting her. WNYC's Ben Fewer heard reports.
The protest last May was organized by a pro-Palestinian student group at Columbia University. The woman, Mary Ellen Novak, says she was acting as a safety marshal there. Novak says after the demonstration, her group was crossing the street in the crosswalk. Then, an SUV driver turned into the crowd and struck her. After the crash, Novak says in legal papers, she and another safety marshal were arrested without cause by NYPD officers. While she was handcuffed, cops took her to a local hospital and two separate police precincts. She was eventually let go about 13 hours later without charges. Novak is seeking unspecified damages for false arrest.
73 with clouds right now. Showers likely with maybe some late afternoon thunderstorms. Partly sunny, 74 and a calm wind.
Stay tuned for more after the break.
NYC.
If you're having spring allergies, yes, I am, you might be one of the many people who look to the internet or listen up when Morning Edition gives information on pollen levels. That information usually comes to us through a website, aaai.org, or Quad AI, as it's known, run by the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. But despite having 8 million people, probably at least 7 million of whom are sneezing their heads off these days, New York City only has one single person tracking the pollen levels here. One person. That one person is Dr. Guy Robinson, and he joins us now. Doctor, thanks for coming to our studios. You must be busy this time of year.
It has been busy. I was unfortunately having to go out of town toward the end of last month, and it just coincided with some of the highest pollen peaks we've had in a few years.
How is it that you are the only person doing this work in this city?
Well, it's hard to get people to do this. It takes rather a long time to learn, and Quad AI requires a certification, which is quite reasonable, to be sure that people are actually counting and reporting the pollen data correctly. And that takes a while to learn and to be able to pass their test.
Is this a paid position, or do you volunteer to do this?
I volunteer to do it. In Europe, they have people who are paid often by government agencies, but here in the United States, it's almost entirely voluntary.
So you won't get rich doing this?
No, that's one thing I warn students when I begin training them. If you enjoy doing it, that's the best thing, because you're not going to get paid very much.
So walk us through the process, Dr. Robinson, just how you do the pollen count. How do you get to it?
Okay, so the sampling equipment, it's called a Burkhardt sampler. It produces a strip of tape on which the pollen is adhered. It's got like a kind of adhesive on it. And that makes one turn in 7 days. So you take the tape off and cut it up into 7 strips. That'll make 7 microscope slides, one for each 24 hours that have passed. It does need to be stained and prepared with a cover slip and everything. Then it can be put on a microscope and the pollen can be counted.
What do you see when you look at those strips through a microscope? What do you see?
Well, you see the pollen grains, and you can identify them by their shapes, their sizes, then their particular surface sculpturing. They're about 25 microns in size, which is about maybe, a quarter to a fifth of a human hair.
Are pollen levels getting higher in New York City?
Well, that's not clear yet. It is probably true if you look at all of the pollen monitoring stations throughout North America. You'll probably find, in fact, we have found that there are significant increases in pollen over, let's say, the last 2 decades. That's not been the case with our 2 stations here, the New York City and the Armonk station. We're not yet seeing earlier onset of pollen season and extending later into the fall, which many places in the U.S. are.
Why do you think that is?
Well, we're not the only outlier in this region. There are a couple of places in, I think, Texas and California that also are not seeing increases, but most of them are. And obviously, we don't know for sure if that's correlating with increased average temperatures. It could also be with increased levels of carbon dioxide, because plants have a tendency to grow more when carbon dioxide levels are higher, and that extends to their pollen production. I don't actually know why we here are not seeing any significant increases as yet.
What's the situation like right now, pollen-wise, in the city?
It's declining at the moment because we've had quite a bit of rain, and we're also getting, even though it's still May, which is typically very high, it's been declining the last few days I've looked. And that may be because the big ones, the birches and the oaks, and the sycamores as well, they're starting to lose their flowers. But we'll still be getting quite a bit for the next few days. Then it'll decline a bit more, and then we'll get another peak toward the end of the month of May.
What are the main offenders here for triggering allergies?
In New York City, it's mostly trees. Now, these are mostly flowering trees, but they're not the kind of flowers that you tend to notice. The big offenders are oak, birch, ash, sycamore, particularly in the city. Sycamore is planted a lot as street trees and park trees. It's otherwise more commonly known as London plane. But there's several others I could list. But they're trees that produce what we call catkins. These are flowers, but they're multiple flowers. They're like tassels. You'll see piles of these catkins have fallen from the trees in the last few days. And they often pile up at the edges of the streets and the gutters. There could be like 50 to 100 flowers on each catkin, and they're falling by the thousands right now.
I've been speaking with Dr. Guy Robinson, a researcher in fossil pollen and New York City's one and only pollen counter. Dr. Robinson, thank you for speaking with us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me down here.
Thanks for listening. This is NYC Now from WNYC. Check us out for updates every weekday, 3 times a day for the latest news headlines and occasional deep dives. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
NYC.